All right, so today we're diving into some pretty cool plant science. We're going to be looking at a study that compares how domesticated tomatoes and their wild counterparts handle drought.
And for this study, they focused on two main tomato varieties. So you've got M82, which is your typical domesticated tomato, the kind you'd find in a grocery store, bred for size and yield. And then you've got Pinelli, which is this wild variety that's adapted to much more arid conditions.
Okay, so it's like a head-to-head between the pampered houseplant and the tough desert survivor.
Yeah, you could think of it that way. Or, I kind of like to think of it more like comparing a sprinter to a marathon runner. One is built for quick bursts of growth, and the other is all about long-term endurance.
I like that analogy. So they're basically putting these tomato athletes through a drought stress test, and they're using this plant array to do it. Can you unpack that setup a little bit more for those of us who aren't plant physiologists?
Sure. So the plant array is essentially this really controlled environment where each plant is individually monitored. They can manipulate the water supply to simulate drought conditions, and then they can track, exactly how the plants respond. And the level of detail they can capture is amazing.
So it's not just seeing which plant wilts first. You're actually seeing how each one copes with that stress on the physiological level. So what kind of differences are we talking about here?
Well, one of the key things they measured was transpiration, which is essentially how much water the plant is losing through its leaves. And they found that M82, the domesticated tomato, it was losing water at a much higher rate than Pinelli.
So M82 was sweating it out while Pinelli was keeping its cool.
Exactly. And they also looked at something called stomatal conductance, which is a measure of how open the pores on the leaves are. These poles are called stomata, and they're crucial for gas exchange, taking in carbon dioxide for photosynthesis and releasing water vapor.
Okay, so it's like the plant's breathing. Is that where the big difference was?
Yeah, M82 had much higher stomatal conductance, meaning its pores were wide open most of the time. Which makes sense if you think about it. Domesticated tomatoes are bred to grow quickly, right? And open pores mean more CO2 uptake for photosynthesis, which fuels that growth.
So M82 is all about maximizing growth, even if it means being a bit of a water hog.
Right. But here's the interesting part. Even though M82 was losing water like crazy, it wasn't actually photosynthesizing at a significantly higher rate than Pinelli.
Hold on. So M82 was guzzling water, but it wasn't getting a proportional increase in energy production. That seems pretty inefficient.
Exactly. Pinelli was actually more water efficient, meaning it could produce the same amount of energy using significantly less water. And this is where the plant array really shines, because the researchers were able to pinpoint the exact moment that each plant started to really feel the stress of the drought.
Ah, so they could see when each tomato hit its breaking point, so to speak. What happened?
Well, M82, the one that was using all that water, it wilted much faster once the soil moisture dropped below a certain point. It was like it didn't even realize the drought was coming until it was too late.
So M82 is the tomato that throws a tantrum when its glass is half empty, and Pinelli is sipping calmly until the last drop.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Pinelli actually reacted sooner to the water depletion. It started closing those stomata we talked about, to conserve moisture, so it was able to keep growing even under the drought stress for much longer.
It's like Pinelli has this built-in early warning system for drought. Did the researchers figure out what's behind that?
Yeah, they did. So they found that Pinelli's leaves are actually structurally different from M82's, which helps it lose less water. It's not just about how open the pores are. The leaves themselves are designed to hold on to moisture better.
Interesting. So it's not just behavioral. It's built into its anatomy. Are there any other differences that give Pinelli this drought-fighting edge?
There's another really fascinating difference. Remember we were talking about photosynthesis? Well, there's this key enzyme involved called rubisco, and Pinelli happens to have a more efficient version of it.
Okay, so a souped-up version of this crucial enzyme. How does that help it handle the drought?
So rubisco is responsible for fixing carbon dioxide from the air. And basically, the more efficient it is, the more carbon a plant can fix using the same amount of water. It's all about maximizing output while minimizing water loss.
That's incredible. So it's not just conserving water, it's using it more effectively, too.
Precisely. And this is one of the reasons why understanding the genetics behind these traits is so important. Imagine if we could figure out how to transfer some of Pinelli's drought tolerance to our domesticated tomato varieties. It could have a huge impact on agriculture, especially in areas that are prone to water scarcity.
That brings up a point I wanted to talk about. We've spent centuries breeding crops for maximum yield, often at the expense of things like drought tolerance. Is this research a sign that we need to rethink our priorities a little bit?
Absolutely. This study is a great example of how looking back at wild relatives can actually offer solutions to modern agricultural challenges. I mean, these wild varieties have evolved over millennia to thrive in these really harsh conditions, and they hold this wealth of genetic diversity that we've largely ignored.
It's like we've been so focused on creating the perfect show dog that we've forgotten about the resilience of the street mud.
That's a great analogy, and it really highlights the importance of preserving biodiversity. These wild species are like a genetic library that we can draw upon to create more resilient crops, especially as we face things like climate change and other challenges.
Okay, so we've been unpacking this incredible study on drought tolerance in tomatoes, and it's given us some amazing insights. I mean, this research really shows the potential of using technology like this plant array system to really understand complex plant behavior.
Yeah, it really is remarkable how this functional phenotyping platform lets researchers capture such precise data on, how plants respond to stress. It's like we're getting this window into their inner workings.
And these insights are valuable, not just for plant scientists,
Yeah.
but for anyone interested in the future of food production, really. Speaking of which, this study has some major implications for agriculture, especially as we face increasing water scarcity around the world. By studying the adaptations of these wild varieties like Pinelli, we can actually identify the genes and traits that contribute to that drought tolerance and potentially, transfer them to the crops that we rely on.
It's like we're getting this blueprint for building a more resilient agricultural system. We're not just relying on, trial and error anymore. We can target specific genes and mechanisms that we know are actually effective.
It's almost like we're taking a page out of nature's playbook. These wild plants have spent millennia evolving these strategies to survive in these harsh environments. And now we actually have the tools to unlock those secrets and apply them to our own food production. It's a very exciting time to be in plant science. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.